And it is no longer news. I mean, it wasn't news when the presidency requested a 1.767 trillion naira loan to add to the 2024 budget. So this is not even, it's still part of the 2024 budget. It was not news when it was requested. And it is not news now that, it has also been approved to fund critical infrastructure and development projects. While some see this as necessary, others are raising concerns. Opposition, the citizens are raising concerns about Nigeria's growing debt profile and also what the monies are being used for. But to have this conversation and to help us make sense of this to an extent, because I don't think any Nigerian can really help us make sense of this completely. We've just been joined by Barrister Chiagozie, who is a lawyer, chartered mediator, and conciliator. Good morning, sir. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Good morning to you, Favor. Good morning.
Good morning.
I mean, let's start from the beginning a bit. When you heard about the request for 1.767 trillion, which is $2.2 billion, how did you feel about it? And now that it has also been approved?
Well, I am rather surprised at that because the federal government just unveiled the 2025 budget. So I don't really understand the relationship between, trying to bring in another, borrow money for 2024 budget when 2025 budget has already been unveiled. I think it would have been proper for the federal government to approve the 2025 budget and then we'll go ahead with it. We're almost there at the end of the year.
Approving 1.77 in
just a couple of like 5 weeks.
5 weeks to the end of the year.
So I don't understand that, honestly speaking. So I don't want to make skating remarks, but then I don't understand that. We just have 5 weeks to the end of the year. I think we should be focused on approving the 2025 budget and then know how we take it from there. So I don't see the necessity for that. The October allocations have already been released to the states, federal government, state and local government. So I don't know what else the federal government wants to do with the $2.2 billion that it wants to borrow, or the approval for borrowing has already been there. If you look at the 2025 budget, you understand, we are going to borrow about 13 trillion. Understand? When we're talking about 2025, then we're also borrowing for 2024 that is coming to an end. So I don't understand. So maybe anybody who's an economist can make sense to it, because for me, it is senseless. It doesn't make any sense.
But at this point in time, apart from us always seeking to borrow money, are there other alternative means we can actually raise these monies we need to, ingest in our infrastructure, other than resorting to just going out all the time to borrow and keep borrowing, and at the end of the day, we don't even see what these monies are being used for?
Well, borrowing is not wrong in itself.
Yes.
The problem we have borrowing in Nigeria is that we borrow and we fritter it away. We borrow and then we channel it to sources that are not actually the proper sources. We borrow and then we misappropriate. That is the challenge we are having. Countries borrow, understand? Even United States still borrow. But then my worry is that we keep on borrowing. If you look at 2025 budget, it's scary because the federal government is trying to appropriate 17 trillion naira for debt servicing alone. So the money allocated for debt servicing in the 2025 budget is almost bigger than the recurrent expenditure for 2025. So my worry is that we borrow and we don't utilize it. We borrow and we buy yacht for the president. We borrow and then we distribute to the National Assembly members. We borrow and then we don't know where these funds are injected. Borrowing, there's nothing wrong with borrowing. But then we are also looking at, definitely we must borrow, because if you look at how much we're expecting to as income, based on the oil and non-oil sources, it's not going to be sufficient for us. So we must borrow. But the worry is that after borrowing, what do we use these borrowed funds for? That is the problem.
And some other critics are concerned about our debt profile. It's increasing, it's running up to like 200 and something trillion, and then again, we're here borrowing more, right? So what do you make out of that conversation by critics calling out on our debt profile increasing quarters by quarters by quarters?
What we should do as a government and as a people is to cut down expenditure. That's what we should do. We should cut down government expenditure. So I was shocked when, instead of cutting down the ministries in the federal government, we are having more ministries, we are having more ministers. So it appears as though the federal government is actually moving very fast at the edge of the precipice. We are sliding down at a very fast pace. That is why every year IMF will encourage us to devalue our currency. So The more we borrow, the more our currency is devalued. The more we borrow, the more Naira is becoming almost like a tissue paper. So what we should do is to cut down expenditure, cut down our expenses. We are running a high expense government. Unless we cut down on government spending, cut down all this expenditure, we are not going anywhere. We keep on borrowing. So any government that comes in finds the, borrowing is an easy way. For me, it's a lazy man's idea of running a government. You try just borrow, go out there, borrow,
That's
go out
why I
there,
was
borrow.
asking the question.
Sort of taking as if there is no box.
Words. Yeah. So I was asking the question, are there no other ways we can actually, fund this infrastructure? Look inwards and find ways to, mop up monies, and sponsor a functional or whatnot infrastructure, right? But than borrowing all the time.
Now, like I said, borrowing is a lazy man's idea, a lazy man's way of running a government, because we can, like I said, we can plug loopholes. We can cut down expenses, government spending. We can plug loopholes of corruption. Thirdly, if we secure Nigeria, because secure people can do business. This is that businesses are leaving Nigeria, multinationals are leaving this country. So we're not actually productive as a nation. So we adopt the lazy man's approach to go and just borrow money instead of looking inwards. There are lots of businesses in Nigeria that are not taxed. Cattle rearing in Nigeria is not taxed, and nobody wants to talk about it. We are being very careful and edgy. We don't want to talk about the cattle business in Nigeria. We are not taxing it. That cattle business is actually a whole lot of multi-million Naira business in Nigeria. But they are not taxed. People are rearing cattle everywhere. Nobody's taxing them. So we can look at taxes, not oppressive taxes. We can look at functional taxes, where we can actually generate money for the country, instead of adopting a lazy man's approach of going to borrow money and then fritter it away and then borrow money again and then devalue the currency and then we are not going anywhere. So I agree with you. We must not always borrow, at least to the extent we are borrowing. We can look inwards and then try to generate revenue. Revenue we need to run this economy is in Nigeria. We can generate enough money to run the economy. If we secure our country, we can even generate enough money from our oil sources. But then we are not producing. Now, if I looked at 2025 budget and I was laughing, they pegged the issue of oil income from oil sources at about 14 trillion. And we're looking at 2.06 million barrels per day. And as at now, we are getting roughly 1.4 million barrels a day. So our budget is actually predicated on a ruse, because as at now, we are not producing 2.06 million barrels a day. We are about 1.4 million barrels a day. So eventually, we are in a budget deficit. Bottom line, we go out again and then we borrow.
I'm going to say something, and which is a point you made, which is we have to look inwards. And with looking inwards, the presidency is very aware of the problems, because I don't know why I'm still hammering on the speech, the speech at the G20 summit, because during his speech at the G20 summit, he talked about terrorism. He talked about insecurity, saying that our farmers cannot go to the farm, saying that our children are out of school and all of that. And a lot of people were saying, what a way to demarket Nigeria. Why would you say something like that and all of that? And then other people were saying this is just a way for him to still go and get more loans or get more aid, and continue to keep us, in debt and debt and debt. Because by the time these people are seeing, this is where we are currently, it will be loans, it will be aids. We're not getting it moving forward. Because
it's like you're mortgaging Nigerians' future.
Exactly, because the problems that we have. You are going out to say the problems that we have, but we're not seeing anything actively being done about it. So you're still going outside the country telling foreign investors, we have problems, these are our problems. But when you come back home, nothing is being done about it. We saw headlines today saying, our policies are making changes. Nigerians are good with the policies. But 2 days ago, you went to tell the world that we are hungry and that we cannot go to the farm and we are insecure and all of that. So, do you agree with critics that keep saying that we are not seeing the impact of these debts and these loans and these aids, in the policies? I will not even say the economy, I will say policies, because the case for the presidency is still that our policies are changing. We have a lot of political spokespeople saying the policies are making waves. The IMF is saying the policies will change Nigeria. We will get the policies done. We keep hearing policies. But do you agree with the critics that are saying that we're not seeing the impact of the reform policies in Nigeria?
I don't see any reform, honestly speaking. The only thing I'm seeing is that we are increasing taxes, that's all. What reforms have we seen so far? What reforms? In what area? Is there a legal reform? Is there an economic reform? There are no reforms anywhere. The only thing we are seeing now is just an increment in the rates of things. Increased tax. They try to get it to 5%, and then northern states say no. Is a no for them. So what we are just seeing is I can't explain it, but then we are not actually making progress. There are no reforms. We are all simply leveraging on the old policies and then try to exacerbate it. People are suffering. That's the fact. So a reform is actually supposed to deliver good governance to people, but we are not actually seeing the impact. You can't tell me that you have a reform and that, like the last year's budget, they say is a budget of renewed hope. Right now, we are hopeless. So we are actually seeing any reform. We are living the day as it goes by. We are not expecting better to happen to us. People are suffering. So we are not seeing any reform. We are simply seeing that things are getting worse off by the day. What the reforms are they talking about? You are devaluing the Naira and then you're telling them you are reform. So is it a positive reform or a negative reform? I will agree if they say there's a reform, but it's a negative reform that is not taking Nigeria anywhere. I agree with the critics. I'm one. So we are not seeing the changes. We are not seeing the improvements in livelihood that Nigerians are suffering. So all this borrowing that they are taking, we are not seeing the impact, the positive impact on this borrowing on Nigerians, on the poor masses, on anybody. We are not seeing the effects. We are borrowing for security. Nigeria is still very insecure. So what are we talking about?
I want to ask, what is the implication of this extended borrowing? What is the implication of it come 2027 or 2031, or, what would it mean if Nigeria continues to borrow like this? I think currently our debt profile is at 18 trillion Naira. But what would it mean if
we're still borrowing more?
And we're still borrowing more. We'll still borrow next year. We'll still borrow. Only God knows how many times next year we'll still borrow.
You're talking about 18 or 80 something trillion now. That means we are still going to borrow 13.08 trillion for 2025 budget because it's a budget deficit. Also, we're still borrowing 30 trillion for 2025. So the more we borrow, the more our economy crashes. No matter how we see it, the more we borrow, the more Naira is devalued. Let me tell you one funny thing that happened. This year's budget is 47.9 trillion, right? And I'm going to tell you that budget is lower than that of 2022. Ask me how. Oh. Now, the one of 2022 is about 29 trillion, right? Now, but then the value of the Naira has so much depreciated that 47 trillion we purchased for you in 2025 was what 22 trillion Naira purchased for you in 2022. So the more we borrow, the more we devalue our currency. Maybe 2026. Understand? If we are still alive to 2026, and I hope that we'll be alive, we may have a budget of 100 trillion Naira, which the value of Naira will still be lower than what we have in 2025. That is the problem associated with borrowing without injecting into useful ventures. So we borrow, we spend, we don't invest. Because if you borrow, and it's like somebody who's borrowing from a fintech, and at the end you borrow to eat, you're not borrowing to invest. So you will pay more. You will pay more when you are borrowing. So we are paying more. We are servicing our debts. Like this 2025 projected debt servicing is pegged at about 14 trillion debt servicing for 2025. So we keep on borrowing and we keep on frittering it away. At the end, Naira is being devalued and our economy is going down. The country as a nation is going down.
So if from what I understand is that the immediate consequence of our continuous borrowing will be Naira devaluation.
Definitely.
That's the immediate consequence. But on the global front, what would it mean for Nigeria as a country if we continue to borrow? If we get maybe a new administration or something like that, would it be difficult for maybe other presidents or other people in power to continue to borrow? What would it look like for Nigeria on the global front?
It will only take an ambitious government that will not be self-serving. An ambitious government that will look at it and say, hey, we've not come to chop money, we've come to serve the nation. If you take a government that will even slash their salaries and slash the salaries of public office holders.
They invest more in PP.
Yes. So it will take a government that will convince people that they can partner with the people. There are lots of money in circulation. You see, there's one funny thing that the government is doing. They're trying to force us to invest in the country. No, you don't force people. You make ease of doing business in Nigeria.
Make it favorable.
Make it favorable so that we can come out. A lot of people are holding money. That's why the federal government is trying to, the CBN, through the federal government, through the CBN, is trying to mop up funds, cash. If you go to the bank, you can't even access your own money. But that's not the way to run a country. You have to get people to believe in your government, get people to believe in your policies. First of all, call down the cost of government. Let Nigerians have confidence in our leaders. Let them know that our leaders are there to serve us. They are not self-serving, they're there to serve us. We can work with them. We can make sacrifices. Nigerians are ready to make sacrifices if they see that the government is making sacrifice. So it will take an ambitious government. If not, if we have government that are similar to the ones we have now, we will keep on borrowing. And Nigeria as a nation will become a dumping ground for the West.
Well, my question is, let's compare, right, regards to other nations in the world and how they borrow and do the due diligence, right? And we looking inwards too, and we always borrow and we're wasteful. At the end of the day, there are no track records of all these monies where they are channeled to, and they keep missing. So in comparing other nations of the world and in Nigeria in borrowing, what are the yardsticks? What are the indices, the indicators like we have to look out for? Like when we are borrowing to, cushion effects, literally, and also when it comes to calling out these leaders who embezzle these funds too. Let's just oppose other nations and Nigeria when it comes to borrowing and we being wasteful and then implementing what these monies are actually borrowed for.
The bane of the Nigerian society is corruption. Do you know how much we lose every year? Hundreds of billions of dollars or billions of naira we're always saving in medical tourism because we don't have very functional hospitals. Do you know how much we lose every year as what would have been the revenue to the government? Our young people are leaving the country in droves. Skilled labor are leaving the country in droves. People are leaving to study abroad. Let me take medical tourism, for instance. Do you know how much we are losing every year because somebody who is sick and he knows he can't access adequate medical care in Nigeria, he leaves the country. For him to leave the country, he will have to buy dollars. So a few naira we have, they are chasing dollars, so people will leave the country. So because of corruption, we are not even investing in critical infrastructure. Do you know that medical tourism alone, medical industry alone can generate trillions of dollars for Nigeria every year? That's the medical industry, because in every country, people get sick. You can't stop people from getting sick. People have terminal illnesses that we can't even treat in Nigeria. So you mop up all the cash you have, then buy dollars. So we are looking for dollars instead of looking for naira. If our hospitals are working, we have at least the sub-Saharan Africans coming to Nigeria for medical treatment. So if they come, they will bring in naira, and our economy will come up. So because the corruption is actually dealing with us. So people are running away from this country. Young people are leaving every day. An average nurse that is in training now tells you that once she's done the training, she's leaving the country. Same for doctors. So corruption is actually dealing with us. Until we deal with corruption, we are not getting anywhere as a nation.
And that brings me to the judiciary and the anti-graft agencies. What are they even doing to go after these people and also mop up all those cash missing somewhere or being stored somewhere? What are they doing to help the nation recover from this impending disaster?
The anti-graft agencies are designed to fail. One, the anti-graft agencies are actually an appendage of the federal government. It should not be so. They are not independent. So if the government is not interested in fighting a particular individual, then the person goes scot-free. Today, we are still begging the ex-governor of Kogi State to come to court. Can you imagine that? Because he's a lackey of the federal government. So all these agencies are sort of an appendage to the federal government. It should not be so. And the way they are designed, for me, I believe that if we want to fight corruption, the anti-corruption agencies should be independent. They should not be appointees of the government, appointees of the federal government. When they are appointees of the federal government, they cannot adequately fight corruption. Then you have an armed force body that you want to fight corruption around the whole country. It cannot work. It should be decentralized. Understand? So before you can do anything as an EFCC officer, you have to take orders from your boss at Abuja. It is not workable. So it should be decentralized so that different regions or different states or different local governments can have an apparatus that can fight corruption at that level. That is why you don't see anti-corruption agencies, anti-graft agencies fighting political office holders, especially those who are in the ruling party. In America, you see anti-graft agencies fighting even those in government, even ex-presidents.
So what's the essence of having these agencies when they can't actually go after those people?
They're not going after anybody. They are just arresting the small fries. They are not actually fighting the real crooks. They are not fighting them. Those people who are actually dealing with the country, they are just pursuing boys who are pressing laptops. I am not a fan of Yahoo boys, right? But then beyond arresting Yahoo boys, those who are actually looting the country dry are being let off the hook day by day. Those are the real guys who we should be after.
I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Barrister Chiagozie, for all your thoughts on this particular topic. I mean, it's something that affects every single Nigerian directly. This is not an indirect affecting. It affects everybody directly. The economy, the current devaluation of the Naira. The Naira is devaluating every single time, and it's affecting everything. Even people that you claim whether you earn in dollars or you earn whatever, by the time you convert that your dollar to Naira.
Even if you want to run away from Nigeria, you spend almost 20 million or thereabouts.
Yes,
even if you want to run away, if you want to Japa is not even cheap now.
Japa is not cheap anymore. Like, staying here is expensive. Living here is equally expensive.
So you die here.
Everything is very expensive. Thank you very much, Barrister Chiagozie,
My pleasure.
for lending on your thoughts on this. And of course, to you, our viewers, thank you very much for sticking with us throughout an amazing week on the Afia Morning Show. Of course, the Afia Morning Weekend Show also airs tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. to 10:30 a.m., which is 30 minutes of extra content. Do well to follow us on all our social media platforms at Afia TV Official. My name is Favor Obinyaluba.
And I remain OG and want you could have a splendid Friday and a weekend ahead. Bye for now.